Today is January 18th, 2012. And your name, please?
My name is Evelyne, but people call me Evie Salzmann.
When and where were you born?
I was born on September 28, 1941 in Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
And tell me about your family. Who were your parents?
My parents were Holocaust survivors, born in Vienna, Austria, and immigrated to Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
What were their names?
My mother's name was Annie Anastasia Salzmann. Well, actually, her maiden name was Bauer, B-A-U-E-R, Bauer. And my dad, Fritz Salzmann.
Before they went to Port-au-Prince, where were they living?
They were living in Vienna, Austria.
What was their employment?
My dad, well, actually, my grandparents, so his parents, had a hardware store in Vienna, which subsequently was taken away by Hitler. And my dad, I do believe, worked in that hardware store, but then he also had to do more. There wasn't enough business, or whatever the reason, I don't know. Became a salesman. And I don't know what he sold,
Do you
but
know?
that's what he did.
Do you know anything about the neighborhood or the community they lived in?
No, not really. Although, you know, I went on a trip to Austria with a friend of theirs, and she took me to the neighborhood where they lived. So I did get to see where they did live. It was in Vienna. At that time, it was called Bezirk, which is the area, I would imagine, referring. And I think it was Fünften Bezirk, which is, I just heard that a lot, which is the 5th district.
Oh, okay. Did your grandparents live there too?
That is where the grandparents lived, because my parents were single. They were dating, but it was a forbidden thing because my mother was Catholic and my father was Jewish. So they did not marry until they got to Haiti in 1938.
Did they talk to you about the reasons that they left?
Oh, yes. Well, Hitler was in power, and my mother had to walk around with the swastika on her arm, and my father and parents had to walk around with the Star of David. So clearly there was prejudice. The uprising of Hitler was at hand, and I believe they because they spoke about it, where there were roundups, you know, where people were starting to be taken to the concentration camps. And with that knowledge, they knew that they had to escape. So they virtually escaped with the clothes on their back. Heard them talk about just $100 in their pockets, which at that time was, you know, more than what $100 is worth today, but nevertheless. And they were able to get on this ship bound for South America. It was actually bound for Argentina, but Argentina closed its doors to the Jews, and the only other port open was Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Was it just your parents who left, or did your grandparents leave as well?
It was, interesting question, it was my parents and one of my father's brothers, Willie. He was the middle brother. There were 3 brothers. His to-be wife, who was also a Christian, could not marry in Austria, so they had to escape in order to have a life. And my grandmother and grandfather came a year later. Want me to tell that story?
Absolutely.
Well, my grandfather was already taken to Dachau, and a year later, which was now 1939, with the proper documents that my father was able to obtain in Haiti, he was able to get him out of the concentration camp.
Wow.
And so they were bound for Haiti, my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandmother was never taken to concentration camp, but my grandfather was.
Do you know any more about extended family, the great uncles and aunts and cousins, what their fate was?
Dachau. My grandmother's brothers and sisters, who I am trying to find now, they're any living survivors,
Mm-hmm.
like myself,
Right.
they all perished in Dachau. And I found their names when I went to Israel last year at Yad Vashem, which is what brings me to you.
Yes. And your grandfather's family, do you know anything about them?
Most of them survived. I don't know of any who perished.
Do you
I have
know
an
how
uncle.
that happened?
I don't know. One uncle went to, a brother of my grandfather went to Israel, and I don't know that there were any others. There were any other siblings. But my grandmother's family didn't make it. Now, my mother's family all survived because they were all Christians.
Right.
They were all Catholic.
Yeah.
And some of them did help my family, hid them under the beds and all kinds of crazy things that went on at that time. They did not talk too much about it.
Right.
It was so painful. It took my uncle years before he was able to open up and write the booklet that I gave you.
Indeed. So your parents arrived in Port-au-Prince when?
In the year 1938, I am not sure of the date. And I have also tried to find the name of the ship that they were on, but have not been able to get that information. However, did find out that a girlfriend of mine from, where was she from? The Assyrian, I'm not sure, Egypt, I believe Egyptian Jews they are. And they were in Haiti, merchants in Haiti. A lot of them came to Haiti and dealt with fabrics and importing of fabrics from those countries. And when he found out that there was a ship at the port with refugees from Europe, I'm not sure they were all from Austria, he went to the president, and I found out the president at that time was Stenio Vincent. Stenio Vincent. And he asked for a favor, and the favor was granted, and the ship was able to disembark,
Wow.
which was a miracle in itself,
Yeah.
because so many were turned away. Cuba turned away ships,
Right.
and like I said before, Argentina. And that in essence is what happened.
And clearly, the world knew what was happening to the Jews in Europe. There was no reason for them not to welcome them, and yet they didn't.
And you know, some of my parents' friends went to the United States. And I've been asked many times, well, how come they didn't go to the United States? Because you had to be sponsored. You had to know someone to sponsor you, and they knew no one.
So it was a big risk, though, getting on a ship knowing that it was going someplace, Argentina or someplace else,
It was better than getting killed.
right? So when they landed there, were they able to get married right away?
I don't know how long it took, but I would imagine they did.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine they did. I do have a little small photo, which I would have to find for you. It is in my collection, of their wedding.
How lovely.
Of their wedding, you know, with all the people from Haiti who attended. And
They had no connections, though, in Port-au-Prince when they landed? No friends?
None whatsoever.
Was there a language issue, do you know?
Oh, yes. Matter of fact, they had been studying Spanish in the hopes of going to Argentina, and so
Mhm.
now they were faced with French and Creole.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, the will to survive was so strong, I would imagine,
Mhm.
you know. And my mom was a millinist. My mom made hats and she made gloves. And my father and mother both had beautiful singing voices.
Mm.
And my father sang in the churches and was paid for it.
Wow.
So they slowly started putting money together. And I remember sitting in my mom's atelier, they call it, her
Mhm.
little room where she made the hats, she formed the hats, and I would sit and watch her, and she taught me how to sew.
Hmm.
And that's when I started sewing on her Singer treadle machine. So, you know, with the money that they put together, slowly put together, they were able to buy equipment and do this, and eventually open up a 5 and 10.
Hmm. So during this time, what happened with your grandparents?
1 year later, 1939, with the proper papers, they came over, and they lived with my parents. Everyone sort of like, you know, like a community. You know, they bonded,
Mhm.
and they lived in a rented house. And my uncle came as well. Otto now came, the booklet you have,
Right.
from Austria. He had escaped from Austria to Switzerland, and then also, I would imagine with the proper papers,
Mhm.
my father and uncle, who had come over with my father, they got the papers and they all lived together
Do you have any idea how they communicated?
in German. We spoke German at home.
But if your grandmother was in Austria, your father was in Dachau, the brother was off in Switzerland, your parents were in Port-au-Prince, how did they stay in touch with each other?
You know, I would imagine mail, because they still had a home
Mm-hmm.
that had not been taken away from them yet.
Right.
So they communicated that way, maybe telegram, I don't know. Those were issues that I never heard discussed.
I think it's extraordinary
Those
that
are interesting
they could keep
questions.
they could keep some track of each other
They
in spite
did.
of the distance.
They did.
It's remarkable.
There were no telephones
Right.
in Haiti at that time.
Right, and we
I
certainly,
grew up without phones, without television. I didn't know who Mickey Mouse was.
oh dear. And here you are in Central Florida. Oh
Isn't
dear.
that awesome?
The last generation of that, I think. So your grandparents then lived with your parents. How did you deal with the religious differences? Was that
There were none.
really?
There were none, because my mother was the only Christian,
Mhm.
and she chose not to practice Christianity.
Okay.
So it was strictly Jewish.
Okay.
And Orthodox to a point, because she kept the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
My parents did not. I
Mhm.
was not raised with the Sabbath keeping.
Mm-hmm.
But the high holidays, the Jewish community got together at a family's house by the name of Bijo, Charles Bijo, who is the man who sponsored the ship.
Oh, wow.
And so all the high holidays were observed at his house. And I went, you know, and Rosh
Interesting.
Hashanah, Yom Kippur, observed. And my mother loved the ambiance of, you know, of the home life, of the Jewish home life, and she later on converted to Judaism.
Hmm.
And they are both buried in Austria at the Jewish cemetery. They
Hmm.
went back to Austria. They missed the culture.
Mm-hmm.
They were grateful for what Haiti had done,
Yes.
you know, for the family, always grateful, and so am I. but they missed the culture,
Sure.
the opera, and my mom missed the winter. She needed the cold. She was very hot in Haiti. It was
Mhm.
very hot.
Right.
Going through the changes in her 50s, and so they chose to go back, and they had enough to retire, and they were given reparations.
Really? And what year was this?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I should have been better prepared. Well, let's do it this way. From 1938, they must have been somewhere around 30 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and in her 50s, so 20 years later, 38, 48, in the late 50s, early 60s.
Okay.
Yeah. I do remember still visiting with my husband in 1962. I was married, and they were still in Haiti. So somewhere in the 60s,
Okay.
later 60s, they went back to Austria.
Yeah. And your grandparents, did they just remain?
Yes. Grandfather died when I was a year old. So we're talking about 1942.
Mhm.
So he lived only 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
and he came down with colon cancer,
Mhm.
and he died. Grandma lived on to, let's see, my son is, you see how I'm doing this? My son is 40, and he was a year old when she died. So that is 39 years ago.
Okay.
We'd have to do some subtraction here. So she never lived anywhere but in Haiti after
Right.
that. She lived with my uncle, Otto,
Yeah.
the one we're talking about.
Did your grandmother seem comfortable living in such a different environment?
So grateful to be alive.
Really?
I never heard any complaints. Haiti has maids,
Mm-hmm.
so that was an advantage to living in Haiti, the help.
Certainly.
They worked hard. I know
Mhm.
they worked very hard. And Grandma was very supportive with even bringing me up and helping me with my homework while my parents were busy
Mm-hmm.
earning a living.
Lovely. So, your own journey, born in Haiti, you went to school there,
Yes,
that you had friends there.
yes.
So your daily language was what?
Well, I speak 4 languages.
Mm-hmm.
I was brought up with German at home. And then I started school. I was put in a private American school called Union School.
Hmm.
And that's where I went until I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke Creole with the maids.
Mm-hmm.
And then in high school, I took a little Spanish. So I've got about 2 years of Spanish that I struggle with. But, I'm very fortunate that I was given the opportunity to learn all those
Mhm.
languages.
Did you seem different as a child? Did you feel the difference in your color, your culture, your language from the other kids that you were with?
Not really. When you are brought up with people of color,
Mm-hmm.
you don't see the difference.
Mhm.
You don't ever see the difference.
Yeah. Did they seem to see a difference in you?
They just loved me because I was blonde and blue-eyed.
How fun.
Yeah.
So from Haiti, what did you do? Where did you go? How did your life go on from there?
Well, Union School ended in the 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so since I had been educated with English,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been too difficult for me to continue in French.
Okay.
My French wasn't as, fluid as English.
Right.
And so as a result, I was sent to a private boarding school. And that was Forest Lake Academy in Maitland. At that time it was Maitland, but now they call
Mhm.
it Apopka.
Right.
And I went there for 3 years. It was difficult at first because the Seventh-day Adventist religion does teach about Jesus.
Right.
but somehow it found its place in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so 50 years later, I have returned. And that's where I live. I now live in Apopka, well, actually in Altamont Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And I belong to Forest Lake Church.
And during the intervening 50 years, where were you? What did you do? How did your life form itself?
I was Jewish. I practiced the Jewish religion and married 3 different times, all 3 Jewish men. And don't really know why none of them worked out, but you know, it is what it is.
Mhm.
I don't feel hurt by it. I've taken the best out of each experience.
Mm.
I have a son. He is turning 40 in March 10th, and he is married to a Korean girl.
Mm.
So the mix has continued, and we now have a little grandson who was born on September 21st, little Mason Lee Randall.
How lovely.
It is.
And did you continue your sewing? How have you supported yourself, and how have you...
Yes, I did continue my sewing. Thank you, Susan, for
Yes.
bringing that up, because that plays a big part in my life today. I have become a quilter. I even had my own quilt exhibit at the Fort Lauderdale Library
Wow.
3 years ago.
Wow.
I did, because I do artsy quilts.
Really?
Yes. Might invite you to come see them one of these days.
Sounds lovely. Yes.
And so, with that knowledge, with that talent that God has given me, I quilt the prayer quilts at Forest Lake Church. I am
Wow.
one of the main quilters. There are others, but I'm one of the main ones. And it's a beautiful ministry. We give it to people in need, people who are sick, people who have lost children, wives, husbands. And
It's-
we don't ask any money for them. We just totally operate by donations.
It's interesting that if you pardon the pun, it brings together so many of the threads of your life.
It sure does.
The loss and the sewing
Yes.
and the deep religious faith. How interesting that you've been able to find a way to bring all those things together and to bring joy not just to you but to other people
It's
as well.
a God thing. I
Lovely.
didn't do it. God led me that way.
Sounds good to me. So you still have open questions about your family. You don't know exactly when they left. You
I just know
you
the
don't-
year.
You don't know the name of the ship. I'm trying to
No.
figure out how we're going to help you find more information.
And big part finding if there are any, I don't know the names of my grandmother's brothers and sisters who perished. But you know, like I said, it did come up on the computer in Yad Vashem, and I just knew, you know, I broke down, I started crying, I just knew, I said, oh, these are my grandmother's brothers and sisters.
What was your grandmother's full name?
Berta, B-E-R-T-A,
Mm-hmm.
Glanz, G-L-A-N-Z, Salzmann, the married name. And she was, I have her birth date. She was born November 5th, 1883. And she died on October 14th, 1973. About 2 or 3 weeks short of her 90th birthday.
Wow.
So I really would like to see if there are any survivors, you know, of that generation, of those brothers and sisters, if they had anyone, or if everyone perished in Dachau.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's certainly worth knowing. So, as we're getting to the end of this tape, do you have any mottos or any messages for future generations? What do you want people to know based on your experiences? What are the important things in your life?
To honor your heritage.
Which means what?
understanding what your parents or grandparents went through, caring about what they went through, and giving them the respect that they so deserve for having gone through so much. As children, we don't understand that. We take them for granted.
Mhm.
And then as the years go on and our lives come to an end, I look at their lives. And because of that, I cherish what they have left behind, and I wanted to share that with the Holocaust Museum. And have given the Torah, which was my grandmother's, and her prayer book.
That's lovely.
And I know that it will be here forever.
Yes.
I will be long gone, they will be long gone, but for generations to come.
We'll make sure your grandson gets to see it.
Oh, that too, yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do this testimony. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure it would mean a lot to my family.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you too.